All right, so reality is constituted in this way through the production of the self. This is where the self is. The self is created, in this relationship with subjectivization. In this subjectivization is how the self is created. All right. This aspect of how subjects are constituted, way people that self-define themselves in the world, the roles that they adopt, the habits that they introduce to themselves, the habits that become routine, these things and how they aggregate across populations and how cultures are formed. This is the thing that Foucault focuses on, this process of subjectivization. All right. Debate is very subjectifying. All right. There's a number of ways that we fashion and form relationships with the self in debate. There's a number of ways that our participation in debate, by our very participation, helps determine what debate is. You can see how your entry into a tournament constrains you in a number of ways, locks you into a certain position. You're then subject to a number of different authority structures, the pairing, all this kind of stuff. But also your existence in that bracket helps define that reality for other people and gives you a possibility of self-definition, a relationship with the self as you compete in debate to have your own sense of identity, right? Like, you understand how this process of co-constitution, how we are both one in and of ourselves and also inextricably part of a community, that we're not just ourselves, but to even define ourselves, who are you, Randy, as a debater, you are not just yourself, you are an amalgamation of power relationships that co-constitute one another. You are more than you. You are not inextricably bound in your own bounded universe. You are part and constitute the world. All right? This is how you make you. Okay, so you understand that. You probably all thought about yourselves for hours on end. Speaking of that, let's just take a momentary break, like relax your mind. That's nice. All right. So, you are more than you, right? You are not just you. You are a collection of power relationships. Your relationship with self co-constitutes the world. All right. So we get this idea of co-constitution, subjectivization. All right. So you can see how, and I'm sure your parents say, that you make all these choices, you brought these consequences on yourself, you understand how your choices impact the world and also constrain yourself and discipline you within a particular role, okay? So in terms of the forces of subjectivization, your personal choice is really important. And that matters somewhat to Foucault. But really what matters the most, and the aspect of subjectivization that seems to be the most powerful for him, is not necessarily the things that we explicitly choose to fashion our identity after, or the ways that we try to take hold of our life and create ourselves, whatever. The most important aspect of subjectivization for Foucault are the things that we take for granted. The unthinking, the almost unseemingly natural aspects of human nature. The assumptions that have gone so deep and unthought that we can't think outside of them anymore. This is the aspect of subjectivization that most intrigues Foucault. The ways in which our subject creation, our definition of self, have become habituated and so taken for granted that they have now, for him, become the central object of importance for his study. The subjectifying forces, the power relationships that relate to subjectivization, that constitute the subject without them thinking it, that become habitual. These things are huge, And he wants to see how these things, sort of originate. This is part of the reason why he studies the clinic and its birth in the 1600s and 1700s, is because he wants to see how this new aspect of health and the object of the population and all that stuff becomes, through a process of change, habituated into our very concept of existence, this idea of a doctor and healthcare and a community clinic and the forces, the actual structure of the hospital and all those things, how those things become a natural aspect of society. So he goes back to those times when it was sort of emerging as discipline, and he's very interested in that. He goes back to Greece, I think partially because he thinks that less things are habit, that there's more going on that's less constrained by, you know, epochs of, you know, habituation and forces of subjectivization. So he's very interested in the way that our culture has developed over time, so that the subject has become something that is kind of produced through an even more regulated, disciplined, and an unfreeing process. I think he's very concerned about that. All right, so that brings me to power relations. Power is not a thing. All right, there's no such thing as power. You can't hold power. It's not like, you know what I mean? It's a relationship. It's like money is worth nothing. It's just paper or whatever. But the reason why money has value is because you and I have agreed that it has monetary value, right? Like we exchange it. We have a relationship with one another. That's what gives it value, you know? So money is an example of the social construction of value, okay? And power. Power is not power over. Power is a relationship exercised between, okay? Power is not power over. Power is a relationship exercised between, all right? So Foucault never really says power in an, you know, by itself. He always says, you know, disciplinary power, power relations, relations of power, kind of joins it that way. All right. So power relations, you know, power relations are not necessarily good or bad. Biopower, the power over life, okay, which is a particular power relationship that defines life and death and all that kind of stuff. Those things, these relationships of power, are not intrinsically bad or good. This is actually an important aspect that a lot of Foucauldian K debaters just sort of miss. They think that Foucault is like saying power bad or something. But no, that's not it. Power and power relationships and biopower can be productive and destructive of both good and bad things. Power relations is simply the way the world is made. He's trying to say that power relations are sort of everywhere, that this is the central unit of analysis we ought to be using when talking about politics and you know, what should be done and all that kind of stuff. So power relationships are forged between people. So one of the things that a lot of Foucauldian scholars and also Foucault, you know, want to talk about is not necessarily the ways that, you know, power is exercised over somebody. You know, it's like, you know, my teacher controls me and therefore I have no agency, you know. The reason why you sit in your desk is because you have disciplined yourself. Self-discipline is the most important aspect of power relations. The subjected is just as much a part of the relationship as the one that is in control, supposedly, and in power. All right? It's a relationship forged between the two. You know, there's an interesting study, you know, I think it was performed in Berkeley, and it was, you know, a bunch of college kids were part of this psychological study, and half of them pretended to be guards, and half of them pretended to be prisoners, and they were just asked to, you know, role play this. And it got way out of hand. They had to shut down the study because the prisoners really became prisoners and subjected themselves to these students that were no bigger, and they're all just college students at Berkeley. And they subjected themselves to these guards. These guards became abusive. The warden was, not the warden, it was like the captain of the guards, was like being a real a-hole and like doing a bunch of terrible stuff to these people and torturing them in some ways. And it got really out of hand, so they shut down the study. It was like, it shocked them how much the people put themselves in those roles. You know, just simply because they were told, you're a guard and you're a prisoner. Just those two labels meant that those people just took a hold of that role and just performed it, you know, like they jumped so into it that they had to shut it down for human rights concerns. So yeah, so power relationships, sometimes the even more powerful aspect of them is the self-disciplining aspect of it.